everybody, I'm Devin Dwyer with ABC News in Washington with our political reporters Adam Kelsey, Johnny Verhoeven with some breaking news here this morning. The campaign of Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, just put out a statement regarding a medical condition that Sanders has been treated for now in Las Vegas, Nevada, where he has been campaigning. Let's show that statement to you right now. The campaign says during a campaign event yesterday evening, Senator Sanders experienced some chest discomfort. Following a medical evaluation and testing, he was found to have a blockage in one artery and 2 stents were successfully inserted. The campaign goes on to say that Bernie Sanders is conversing and in good spirits. He's resting up over the next few days. We are canceling his events and appearances until further notice and will continue to provide appropriate updates. Bernie Sanders would be the oldest president ever elected. He's the oldest candidate in the Democratic field right now, but has been very active on the campaign trail. No known medical conditions. In 2016, his doctor released a letter, his congressional physician, that he was in a very good bill of health. But Adam Kelsey, our Sanders campaign reporter, this is a very significant development for this campaign.
Certainly, the fact that he's going to be taking time off of the trail for now. Sanders is somebody who, despite his age, as you mentioned, has actually kept up a very busy schedule. He had about 12 events over the course of 4 days when I was with him in Iowa early last week. Continued his campaigning into New Hampshire over the weekend. Las Vegas, as you mentioned, he has got scheduled stops in California and Iowa the rest of this week. So, Devin, to see him come off the trail, we read the statement, but certainly this is something that's obviously a little bit serious here.
We understand, Johnny, that his team is frustrated by this development, understandably so. He's been sort of locked in a second and third place spot in this primary. He has really struggled to break out in the numbers. So this doesn't come at a very good time.
No, this is a crucial time for the campaign. We're just getting into the fall. We're getting close to the Iowa caucuses in February, which is crucial. Bernie Sanders almost won the Iowa caucuses in 2016. And Bernie Sanders, this is a day after his campaign just raised $25 million. Obviously, his health is the top concern right now. But when you talk about the campaign, this is a key time for him. And like you said, he is second in a lot of ways, but he still has had that grassroots support that he had in 2016. And he's going to have a lot of staying power in this race.
And now suffering from some sort of a heart treatment in Nevada. If you're just joining us, some breaking news regarding the campaign of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. The campaign saying that he's now been treated for some sort of chest pains, heart condition. It's hard to know how serious this is, but he is hospitalized. His schedule has been cleared. 2 stents have been put in, and I'm joined on the phone now by Dr. Jen Ashton, the ABC News medical correspondent. Dr. Ashton, thanks for joining us. Give us a sense of your read of this statement from the campaign. Does this mean that Bernie Sanders has had a heart attack?
Well, I mean, first of all, that would be speculation right now for any physician to comment on that. Here's what we can tell you about emergency stent placement. First, we have to understand and remember what kind of numbers we're talking about. Heart disease, the #1 killer of men and women in this country. When someone has chest pain or any number of symptoms that could be associated with a heart attack, absolutely the standard of care, everyone needs to know this, is to seek emergency medical attention, call 911 or present to an emergency room. At that point, an EKG of the heart will be done, and based on those EKG findings, it is not uncommon for a patient to be brought to the cath lab where those coronary arteries are then explored. If a blockage is found, it is absolutely an indication for stent placement, and a stent is basically just kind of an opening of that artery. The setting of an acute heart attack is one of several indications for stent placement. There are others, such as unstable angina or even stable angina, but in an abrupt kind of circumstance like this, obviously an acute heart attack is one item on what we call the differential.
But as you said at the top, certainly we don't know enough information yet whether that was the case here, which is a good reminder. But how do you gauge how serious this is? We do hear a lot about stents being put in patients, as you said, when they are found to have some of these symptoms. Bernie Sanders, we know his physician just a few years ago put out a statement that he had no history of heart disease, no history of high blood pressure, only was treated for some mild high cholesterol. But this will take him off the trail, right, for some time. You can't be very active after you've had this procedure?
Well, listen, just from a medical standpoint, I think it's important to remember that, the statistics, again, every 40 seconds in the United States, someone has a heart attack, and the average age of a heart attack for men is 65. It can and does occur in the setting of someone who has, quote unquote, a clean bill of health. Of course, that's less likely than someone who has high cholesterol or high blood pressure or diabetes, but age is a major risk factor, and the appropriate medical action needs to be taken in terms of whether it's stent or bypass surgery or medical management. That is a very complex individual case-by-case decision, but a setting to place a stent is usually made with cardiologists and cardiac surgeons together, along with the patient, and to decide what is appropriate for that patient at that time.
Dr. Jen Ashton on the phone with us, ABC News chief medical correspondent. Thank you, Jen. I want to go now to ABC News correspondent Avery Harper. She's out in Nevada. She's been traveling with the Sanders campaign when this all went down. Avery, give us a sense of what the senator had been doing the past 24 hours when these symptoms first emerged.
Well, I was with Senator Sanders in New Hampshire over the weekend where he crisscrossed the state. He did town halls. He stopped at colleges to do rallies. And he seemed jovial. He was interacting with voters. He was taking selfies. He was doing his normal thing. So it was shocking to hear this morning that he was hospitalized. Just last night, he had a public appearance where he went to the Las Vegas shooting memorial. And today he was scheduled to do 3 campaign stops, including a forum on gun violence here with Gabby Giffords. And so definitely very shocking to hear that he has been hospitalized. All of those stops that he had for today have been canceled. He was scheduled to go to California, where I was going to travel with him later on this weekend. So all of that has come to a complete stop.
And Nevada, really a bright spot in the Sanders campaign operation of early states, Nevada following South Carolina in those first polls. Let's take a look at a new poll that just came out this week from Nevada. Look at this. Is this the, I'm not sure this is the right poll here. This is, it's not the right poll, but I was going to point out, Adam Kelsey, that Bernie Sanders was actually leading in Nevada in this primary race. It's one of the few states that he's on top.
Yeah, making inroads in Nevada where union voters make up a big percentage of the Democratic, registered Democrats. Think of all the folks who work in the hotels in Las Vegas. A number of these events that Sanders was holding in that area, not just this week, but in past months, have been focused on labor issues with members of the hospitality unions, and as he's continued to roll out plans to protect those unions, to extend Medicare for all, and make sure that everybody in those unions is covered, obviously that has something to do with his progress in making inroads in Nevada.
And if you're just joining us here on ABC News Live, some breaking news this morning regarding the campaign of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, now hospitalized on the campaign trail in Nevada for a heart condition. His campaign releasing a statement a few minutes ago saying that the senator was diagnosed with one clogged artery, has had 2 stents put in a surgical procedure overnight. He's now resting comfortably, is conscious, in good spirits, but has canceled all campaign events for the foreseeable future as he continues to recover from this. And Adam, I know you were just getting some reporting that his wife, Jane, is headed that way, perhaps a sign that this could be relatively serious, that she is going to stop what she's doing and fly cross country. Cecilia Vega joins us now from the White House. She has been out there on the campaign trail with Bernie Sanders. 2016 has seen him up close. And Cecilia, you know as well as anybody that this issue of age and health is going to be front and center, particularly with the man in the house behind you. He has already attacked his rivals in this field for their age.
Yeah, exactly. And Devin, the irony I don't think is lost on anybody as we were talking about an election that is moving forward with, the most number of diverse candidates in terms of gender and race and ethnicity. That the top of the pack is being led by potentially septuagenarians at this point. That 2020 field, Sanders is the oldest at 78 years old. He has talked about his health in the past. I think you guys have mentioned this. He said that he's been very blessed with his health. It sounds like he's doing well according to the campaign right now. But, this really does call into question what happens going forward. The race between Sanders and Elizabeth Warren has been especially tight in the last few weeks. Warren really coming up close and inching up into Bernie Sanders' field. And you know this, they are vying for that same pack of progressive voters. You mentioned that I covered Sanders back in 2016. I will tell you, Devin, I'd been to many, many rallies. You could see that movement, that grassroots support that Bernie Sanders enjoyed back then and is still trying to drum up right now, of progressive, young, particularly blue-collar workers, workers and voters that he's not just trying to peel away from Elizabeth Warren, that he's trying to peel away from President Trump as we head into 2020. But as you said, the campaign says that Sanders is conversing and at least in good spirits right now.
Cecilia Vega for us at the White House. Thanks so much, Cecilia. Let's bring in Terry Moran, our chief national correspondent as well, who spent some time out on the trail. Also has interviewed Bernie Sanders, been up close with Bernie. Terry, this is a very significant development for any candidate. You remember Hillary Clinton faced questions. She fainted at that 9/11 ceremony late in the campaign, and it really sort of created an impression among the public about her electability, her health, raised a whole lot of questions.
Well, it raised a whole lot of questions because her opponent, Donald Trump, exploited them aggressively. And there were people on conservative media who were spinning conspiracy theories about that she was hiding some very serious health problem. But there's no question that Bernie Sanders will face questions about his health going forward. He has in the past, and he's been happy to answer them. Think about Bernie Sanders. You know, he described as being conscious and pissed off, which I think can describe most of his adult life, it seems. He is a man of remarkable energy and vitality out there on the campaign trail. The fact that as the oldest candidate, look at that picture there, he has the youngest, the strongest support among young Democrats is a testament to his vitality. He has lit millions of young people up with his message of very strong progressive policies. And he takes it to people. He's an old-fashioned kind of tub thumper out there on the campaign trail. The impression you get from Bernie Sanders is vitality. Now, this is a pretty significant health issue for anyone, certainly for a man at his age, and voters will take that into account. But it is important to remember the passion that he inspires, especially among the young, because of his ideas and the vitality that he brings to that. Can he sustain those given this health setback?
Yeah, and to Terry's point, Devin, something that I've heard from voters on the trail is that they don't mind his age. And if anything, his consistency for 30, 40 years in the public eye, going back to when he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, that he's still talking about the same issues. They appreciate that at his age, he is still as progressive as they are.
And as active as they are in many cases, really setting a pretty quick pace, as Terry was talking about there. We're getting some reaction in right now to this news regarding the health of Bernie Sanders from some of his rivals in the Democratic primary. Here's Julian Castro sending his best wishes to Bernie Sanders as he recuperates in that Nevada hospital. Our whole team has you in their thoughts. We're also hearing from not the president there, but we're hearing from Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, as well. Some of the other candidates weighing in on this. If you're just joining us here, there's Beto O'Rourke. Some breaking news here as we approach the top of the hour. Bernie Sanders' campaign announcing that he is going to be off the trail for the foreseeable future as he was treated overnight in Nevada for some chest pains, including a clogged artery, 2 stents put in. His wife on her way out to join Bernie Sanders. This after a really remarkable third quarter, top fundraising numbers, surging in the polls, starting to play in Iowa. Johnny Verhoeven. Would you expect them to be considering whether he would get out?
I mean, it's a possibility. I think we still need to see sort of exactly how serious this issue is. But I just wanted to go back to those tweets that we had, and just to see that this field really has a reverence for Bernie Sanders. He has been a staple in Democratic politics for a long time, been very consistent, especially in the last couple of years after 2016. I think you'll continue to see that sentiment.
All right, guys, thanks so much. We'll be back with you later today as well. On this breaking news, Adam Kelsey, Johnny Verhoeven here. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Thanks for joining us this morning here on ABC News Live. Continuing coverage ahead right now with my colleague Kimberly Brooks from New York. She's going to pick it up right now and continue with the debrief. Hey, Kim.
Hey, Devin, thank you so much. Guys, if you were listening to that coverage, you know there was breaking news this morning. A medical emergency for Vermont Senator and presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, hospitalized in Nevada. And we had a statement from the Sanders campaign that was just released, but I want to bring in Cecilia Vega at the White House to discuss this right now. So, Cecilia, a significant development here.
Yeah, Kimberly, this certainly is, and the campaign says in that statement that you're referencing that for now all events and appearances are being canceled until further notice. They say that they'll continue to provide us updates, but let me just read to you the statement from the campaign, because it does give us some details. During a campaign event yesterday evening, Senator Sanders experienced some chest discomfort. Following medical evaluation and testing, he was found to have a blockage in one artery, and 2 stents were successfully inserted. Senator Sanders is conversing and in good spirits. They say he will be resting up over the next few days. You know this. Let's just do a quick recap here. Bernie Sanders from Vermont is the oldest candidate in the 2020 field at 78 years old. He has been consistently in the top of the pack there with his in polling among the top 3, really. And in recent weeks and months, actually, I should say in recent weeks, Senator Elizabeth Warren has really been inching in on some of his support there. I covered Bernie Sanders back in 2016 in that hard-fought, really a bitter primary against Hillary Clinton. And I will tell you, Kimberly, you know, I'd been to many rallies where these crowds, these overwhelming support for Bernie Sanders were really just remarkable to see in this movement that he created, this feel the burn that you could hear chanted back in 2016 of young progressive voters, grassroots base that really catapulted Bernie Sanders to the top of that pack. He's talked about his age. He has said that health was not a problem in running for the both in this race and the last one. But you know, I think this is going to actually pose some questions for him going forward, and a number of the other older candidates, including this president who is in the White House here behind me right now. But I will tell you, Kimberly, it was tough to keep up with Senator Sanders back in 2016. The man has a fast pace when it comes to campaigning, and his campaign right now says that he is still doing remarkably well for where he is.
That's very good to hear. And do we need to, you know, do we think that this is pretty serious? I mean, his wife is supposed to be flying to see him right now, stopping what she's doing to fly across the country.
Yeah, I'm not a medical expert, so I'll leave that to them. But the fact that his wife is flying out there, you know, they have a very close marriage, and certainly she would want to be by his side in this.
All right. We have Cecilia Vega right there at the White House with the latest. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And guys, we're moving on overseas to news out of North Korea. The regime firing a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan just hours after announcing upcoming nuclear talks with the U.S. this weekend. So I want to bring in global affairs correspondent. We have Louis Martinez at the Pentagon with more on this. Louis, if you're there, what do we know about this launch?
Well, Kimberly, what this was a submarine-launched ballistic missile. That means it's capable of being launched from a submarine. But what we hear from U.S. officials that it was not launched from a submarine, but instead probably some kind of a platform off the coast of North Korea. The intent here is to test this capability. We know that North Korea wants to develop a submarine capability where they can launch ballistic missiles. Of course, that's a big threat beyond the ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles that the United States is truly worried about. But this missile, much different than the ones that we've seen in recent months. In recent months, those are short-range missiles that went into the Sea of Japan, kind of just an irritant to the United States while there's a hold on U.S. and North Korea denuclearization talks. But this is a missile that went almost 500 miles up into the sky and about 300 miles into the Sea of Japan. Of a different capability, highly significant, and so something that really caught a lot of people's attention last night.
Yeah, so what kind of message does this send, since there's supposed to be talks scheduled for this weekend?
No, you're exactly right. This is something that is going to raise concern among U.S. officials because there is the joint announcement that came out yesterday that North Korea and the United States want to hold talks. They want to resume what they call working level talks between North Korea and the United States to denuclearize North Korea. For the last 3 months, we've been hearing that, yes, these talks are going to be restarting. This all happened after President Trump met with Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, that separates North Korea and South Korea. That was a dramatic gesture, and they said we're going to restart the talks, but they haven't started back up at all. And so here you have this announcement that they're going to start up again at an undisclosed location this weekend, and the next thing you know, North Korea comes out with this provocation.
All right. Louis Martinez right there at the Pentagon. Thank you for the updates there. We appreciate it. And guys, it was a deeply emotional day in Dallas yesterday as the fate of former Dallas police officer Amber Geiger was decided by a jury that deliberated for 5 hours. It was a unanimous decision in the verdict, guilty for fatally shooting 26-year-old Botham Jean in his own home. And so today, that same jury will consider her sentence. So I want to go to Marcus Moore, who's in Dallas with the latest. Marcus, good to see you again. We know it was very emotional yesterday. What's the energy like today with this sentencing coming down?
Well, hey, Kimberly, good morning. Good to be back with you. And certainly there's still an enormous amount of interest in this. I wanted to show you very quickly where a number of the journalists who have been covering this story have been gathering to listen to the testimony that's still underway this morning during the sentencing phase. And all of the activity is happening inside the courtroom that is down this hallway. And you see a number of people in the hallway there waiting at various courtrooms, court proceedings. But then there's the one at the end where Amber Geiger was found guilty yesterday of murder. And this morning, as we are in the sentencing phase, more witnesses have been testifying for the state, talking about Botham Jean, the kind of person he was, hoping to continue to reinforce to the jury how much of a loss this is so that they will give the appropriate sentence. Right now, Amber Geiger, now a convicted murderer, is facing 5 to 99 years in prison, Kimberly, and we know that the state will have at least 2 more witnesses testify before the defense has an opportunity to present their case to the jury in this sentencing phase. And we still don't know if Amber Geiger will take the stand. There was some discussion that perhaps she will, but the court is preparing for either eventuality. But we do know that in the end there will be someone testifying, a character witness testifying to her character, hoping to get some leniency from the jury.
Yeah, Marcus, 5 years to 99 years, that's such a wide gap. What is the family and the attorneys for the family, what are they hoping for?
Well, they're just hoping for the...
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here as we observe the district work period in their the holy days. As we gather here, our members across the country are having communication with their constituents on 2 subjects in particular, and one perhaps. The first is on our legislation, H.R. 3, to lower the cost of prescription drugs now. We are very pleased that the response that members are receiving as we've asked them to go out there to receive public comment on H.R. 3. And when they return, we will be ready to proceed, some in committee, others just among members, to present the legislation. H.R. 3 is important because, as I've said to you before, across the country, you could see grown men cry at meetings because of the cost of prescription drugs. It's almost impossible for them to be healthy and financially healthy with the rising cost of prescription drugs. In the last year's election, this was a very high priority. It continues to be. So when the president says that he can't do anything if he has the threat of impeachment or the consideration of impeachment, I hope he doesn't mean he doesn't want to work together to lower the cost of prescription drugs. It would give the secretary additional powers to negotiate for lower cost. It would end the disparity of cost between what consumers in America pay and what they pay in other countries. It would have a cap on out-of-pocket expenses for catastrophic Medicare expenses. It would also, in the negotiation, not only be for Medicare, but for all, and it would have an inflation rebate that reverses years of increases. So we're very pleased with the work that has gone into it so far by our 3 chairmen, Frank Pallone of Energy and Commerce, Richie Neal of Ways and Means, and Bobby Scott of Education and Workforce, and many members as well. We will be discussing this again over the break and the district work period when we return. At the same time, we are making progress on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. This is an issue of concern around the country, and we want to be sure that as we go forward, we are strengthening America's working families and our farmers who are very affected by this. This is not about trickle-down trade. We're not trickle-down economics people. We're not trickle-down trade people either, unless it hits home for our workers and our farmers in terms of enforceability. We can't be there yet. But we are on a path to yes. And as you probably know, on Friday, our task force under leadership of Richie Neal in Ways and Means put forth a counteroffer to what the administration has proposed. When we can arrive at a place where not only do we have our issues addressed, but that we have enforceability that will make it real for America's families and farmers, then we can go down that path. I hope, again, that the president's saying because of other actions in terms of upholding the Constitution of the United States, that he can't work with us because I do think he wants this U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, and we want it when it is right in terms of enforceability and that we can work together. At the same time, we're hoping that we can renew our conversations about infrastructure, building the infrastructure of America. As I've said, our agenda last year when we ran was for the people. Lower the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. That's what we're doing. Build the infrastructure of America in a green way so that we can increase paychecks, lower health care, bigger paychecks, cleaner government. Well, I think that we can work with the administration on prescription drugs. I hope so. And infrastructure. I hope so. Clean government. That's more of a challenge. So as we gather here today, we are clearly at a place where we are legislating to try to meet the needs of the American people in a transformative way. We are investigating. We are litigating. We also are here today on the one-year anniversary of the Khashoggi, since Khashoggi was killed. It's such a very sad thing. And at the same time, you see the administration schmoozing with the very people who perhaps orchestrated that. Again, it's yesterday the Chinese observed their 70th anniversary. At the same time, the president was very positive about that. Well, observing their anniversary is one thing, praising them for it is another when they have serious repression going on right now in China, whether it's undermining the culture, language, and religion of Tibet, whether it's the placing in education camps 1, 2, or 3, depending on the cause, but at least 1 million Uyghurs, and whether it's the suppression of democracy in Hong Kong and just the violation of human rights throughout China. It's the same fight we've been having for years. For what does it profit a man or a country if he gains the whole world and suffers the loss of his soul? But we seem to be able to ignore the shout-out from our soul on respecting the dignity and worth of every person. So I know many of you are here. Some of you are regulars. Many of you are not. And I said to Mr. Schiff, maybe you should come to all of our meetings. We might get some coverage for what we're trying to do for the American people. But we are very proud of the work of our chairman of the Intelligence Committee. We take this to be a very sad time for the American people, for our country. Impeaching a president or having the investigation to impeach a president is not anything to be joyful about. I don't know that anybody's joyful, but it is a sad time. And as you've heard me say over and over again, in the dark days of the revolution, Thomas Paine said, the times have found us. We think the times have found us now. Not that we place ourselves in the category of greatness of our founders, but we do place ourselves in a time of urgency on the threat to the Constitution, a system of checks and balances that is being made. They fought for our independence. They declared independence. They fought and won. They established a democracy. Thank God they made the Constitution amendable so it could always ever be expanding freedom. And we see the actions of this president being an assault on the Constitution. Once we had his even admission to that, we had no choice but to go forward. It's hard. We want to weigh the equities. We want to be fair as we go forward. And we couldn't be better served than by the leadership of our chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, and it's my honor to present him to you now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for leading the entire House of Representatives through this very fraught time in the history of the Congress, indeed the history of the country. I also want to express my own condolence once again to the family of Jamal Khashoggi, who bravely sought to advocate for free expression in Saudi Arabia, and it cost him his life. We are deeply in his debt, and we are determined to bring about justice for those who were responsible for that heinous murder. It's also an appropriate time to recognize the danger facing journalists all over the world. In terms of the issues that we've been focused on this week, I want to give you a brief update of what has transpired really just within the last week. Last Thursday, the Intelligence Committee held an open hearing with the acting Director of National Intelligence. The following day, Chairman Engel issued a subpoena to the State Department in close consultation with myself and Chairman Cummings. We are deeply concerned about Secretary Pompeo's effort now to potentially interfere with witnesses whose testimony is needed before our committee, many of whom are mentioned in the whistleblower complaint. And we want to make it abundantly clear that any effort by the Secretary, by the President, or anyone else to interfere with the Congress's ability to call before it relevant witnesses will be considered as evidence of obstruction of the lawful functions of Congress. And more than that, will allow an adverse inference to be drawn as to the underlying facts. That if they are going to prevent witnesses from coming forward to testify on the allegations in the whistleblower complaint, that will create an adverse inference that those allegations are in fact correct. On Monday, I issued a subpoena to Rudy Giuliani, again in consultation with Chairman Cummings and Engel. We expect Mr. Giuliani to comply with the legal process we are using. He is obviously a key figure in all of this by his own admission as well as by the allegations in the whistleblower complaint. Today, and just within the last half hour, Chairman Cummings noticed a subpoena that will go out later this week or next week after the notice period has expired, that committee intends to subpoena documents that the White House has been withholding from Congress. We are obviously coordinating very closely with Chairman Cummings on that. On Thursday, Ambassador Volker is scheduled to appear before our committee. And on Friday, the Inspector General of the IC, Mr. Atkinson, will appear before the committee and testify as well. The last time that the Inspector General testified, we did not have the complaint. We now do. And we certainly intend to ask the Director about the efforts that were made to corroborate that complaint, which we now know the Inspector General found both credible and urgent. Next week, we have also scheduled a deposition or interview with the former U.S. Ambassador Yovanovitch to Ukraine. And we are in discussion with other State Department witnesses to secure their depositions. So we've been very busy, as you can tell, this week. We're going to be very busy again next week. We are proceeding deliberately, but at the same time, we feel a real sense of urgency here that this work needs to get done, and it needs to get done in a responsible period of time. Thank you.
Chairman, just one moment, please. I'll decide who asks the question. Do we have any questions first on any work to meet the needs of the American people in terms of USMCA and the H.R. 3 on that subject?
How do you envision working with this president on these key Democratic agenda items, lowering prescription drug costs, ensuring tougher gun safety measures, as you're actively considering whether to remove them?
But they have nothing to do with each other. We have a responsibility to uphold our oath of office, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. We also have a responsibility to get the job done for the American people. The president has said he wants this Mexico-U.S. U.S.-Mexico Canada trade agreement to go forward, and we are awaiting the language on enforceability. Does it mean that he can't do that? That's really up to him. And I do expect that he does want that, and that he does need that, and that he's not going to blame it on us because we are honoring our oath of office. And then he says that he wants to lower the cost of prescription drugs. The American people want us to do that. So as the president saying, if you question my actions, I can't agree on any subject, then the ball is in his court on that. But many of you have always been interested in USMCA. Any ongoing interest there? Yes, sir.
On the USMCA, the president keeps saying that the USMCA doesn't pay for his wall. How does money generated by the USMCA work its way into the general fund to be appropriated by Congress?
It doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker.
No, I'm not calling on you. I'm calling on this young lady here. Thank you.
Question for you and one for Chairman Schiff. Do you have planned, or have you taken off the table the idea of a full House vote on
I'm first. Excuse me, dear. I'm first doing HR 3. Anyone on HR 3? Does anybody in this room care about the cost of prescription drugs and what it means to America's working families? From time to time, you've asked those questions. Does anyone care about the USMCA, U.S.-Mexico, Canada agreement?
A hard, fast date on when you need this to be resolved on
This being what?
USMCA.
No, we're on a path to yes, as far as the trade agreement is concerned. And at some point, I'm just saying it's either yes or no. We either have enforceability or we don't. But I'm hopeful that we will, and I'm hopeful that it will be soon.
What kind of deadline you've given the administration or anything?
No, well, we have a good working relationship. Believe me, the quiet you hear is progress. And we go back and forth, and over this break, the steps are between the two, the trade rep and our negotiators are seeking clarification, and where there's room for cooperation, where we may have more challenges, but it's going in a forward direction. So we're very pleased with that because, again, we're trying to find common ground with the president. He always wanted this. We do too. And let's just find our common ground in that regard.
Speaker Pelosi, another question on policy before we get to the other news of the day, which is impeachment. What about the quiet we hear on gun legislation? 2 or 3 weeks ago, the White House telegraphed we might hear what the president would support in some sort of gun package. And we in the press have heard nothing. Have you heard anything from the White House?
Well, the most recent communication I had from the White House on gun violence prevention was a call from the president last Tuesday. So we can segue from one subject to the next here. He called early that morning to say that how happy I would be to see the progress that he was making on coming to agreement on gun violence prevention. I was curious about what that progress could be. He said he was working with Democrats and Republicans. I don't know of any. I reminded him that we had sent a bill over to the Senate, H.R. 8 and H.R. 1112, 2 pieces of legislation that will save the most lives, and that I would hope that whatever he was talking about was very close to that. Oh, yes, you're going to be very pleased. That's the last I've heard of that. At that point, that is when the president segued into the telephone call in which he admitted that this call took place and that what happened was perfect. I said, Mr. President, it's not perfect, it's wrong. But your admission to what has now been in the public domain informs the timing of how we go forward. Again, that was the last I heard from them. Let me just say on gun violence prevention, we're not going away until we get legislation signed into law that protects our children. I said to the president on another occasion, on the 200th day of the Chuck Schumer and I called the president on that. That was a couple of Sundays ago. I think like the 15th of September, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. That was the 200th day since we sent over H.R. 8. And I said to the president, I pray for you and the safety of you and your family. And I hope that pray that God will give you an illumination, an enlightenment to pray to work for the safety of other families in our country. So again, the most recent, I'm not going to say the last, I hope it's not the last, but the most recent communication I've had from the White House was in the same call where the president admitted to what he said in that phone conversation. Okay?
Madam Speaker.
Now you
Thank you, Speaker, on impeachment.
Yes.
Have you taken off the table, or do you plan for a full House vote on impeachment inquiry? And Chairman Schiff, as the White House seems to be, in the words, you're worried about interference, delays. In the past, sometimes it's taken a long time, years, to compel documents and testimony from the White House. Are you preparing for a court battle, and how do you make sure that that happens in what you say is an expeditious manner?
First of all, there's no requirement that there be a floor vote. That's not anything that is excluded. And by the way, there's some Republicans that are very nervous about our bringing that vote to the floor.
Just say that we are concerned that the White House will attempt to stonewall our investigation, much as they have stonewalled other committees in the past. It's why I say the White House needs to understand that any action like that, that forces us to litigate or have to consider litigation, will be considered further evidence of obstruction of justice. And of course, that was an article of impeachment against Nixon, the obstruction of the lawful functions of Congress, that is. We will also draw the inference, though, as appropriate, that they are trying to conceal facts that would corroborate the allegations in the whistleblower complaint. So we'll have to decide whether to litigate or how to litigate. We're not fooling around here, though. We don't want this to drag on months and months and months, which appears to be the administration's strategy. So they just need to know that even as they try to undermine our ability to find the facts around the president's effort to coerce a foreign leader to create dirt that he can use against the political opponent, that they will be strengthening the case on obstruction if they behave that way.
Chairman Schiff.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I would like to ask Madam Speaker and also Chairman this as well. The president wants to interview the whistleblower. He says he has the right to meet his accuser. Your response, both of you, please.
The whistleblower has the right on the statute to remain anonymous, and we will do everything in our power to make sure that that whistleblower is protected, that whistleblower's preferences in terms of their anonymity are respected. And let's not make any mistake here. The president wants to make this all about the whistleblower and suggest people that come forward with evidence of his wrongdoing are somehow treasonous and should be treated as traitors and spies. This is a blatant effort to intimidate witnesses. It's an incitement to violence. And I would hope, and we're starting to see members of both parties speaking out against attacking this whistleblower or others that have pertinent information. So the other thing I wanted to underscore, though, is what the whistleblower has set out that is within our power to this date to confirm, we see confirmed in that call record. The president can attack the whistleblower rhetorically all the president wants. It doesn't change the fact that the record of that call shows the President of the United States in a same conversation, indeed immediately after the Ukraine president asked for more military help, the President of the United States asked that leader a favor, though. And no attack on the whistleblower or anyone else is going to change those underlying facts.
How do you respond? Chairman,
Excuse me, on the subject of the whistleblower, I said to the president on that call, you've come into my wheelhouse. 25 years on the Intelligence Committee as a member, as ranking member, as Mr. Schiff was before he became the chairman when we got the majority. So I was part of the Gang of Four before I was even in the leadership as a Gang of Eight. So for 25 years, one way or another. I was there when we improved the whistleblower legislation in the late 90s. I was part of that. I was there when we made further improvements, and President Obama made by executive, I don't know if it was executive order, but executive action, improvements in the whistleblower legislation. And then we have further legislation. And then I was there when we created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and what his responsibility was in terms of a whistleblower. So this is very, I hope that you understand, and I suspect that you do, the seriousness of the President of the United States saying he wants to interview that person. We will treat the President with fairness as we go forward. We will have investigations and questioning that are worthy of the Constitution of the United States. It's unworthy of the Constitution of the United States to do what he did in that call, and he admitted to me, he said it's perfect. No, it's not perfect. It's wrong. A, and B, that protecting whistleblowers is a very, very important requirement that we have. The intelligence community recognizes the importance of whistleblowers. Protecting whistleblowers who see wrongdoing of any kind in our government is essential. So the president probably doesn't realize how dangerous his statements are when he says he wants to expose who the whistleblower is and those who may have given the whistleblower that information. This is a very serious challenge that the president has put there. It's very sad. I don't see impeachment as a unifying thing for our country. I weighed those equities hard and long till I had the president's admission that he did what he did.
So, Madam Speaker,
One big picture question and one logistical question, just following up on what you just said. Some Republicans have said that the president's phone call wasn't great, but that it isn't an impeachable offense. Is it possible that you're making too much of one phone call?
Absolutely not. I'm going to yield to you.
Well, if you think about what the framers were concerned about at the time of the drafting of the Constitution, they were paramountly concerned about foreign interference in American affairs. They wanted to ensure that the President of the United States was defending the interests and national security of the United States and not corruptly, secretly advancing some private agenda with a foreign power. It's hard to imagine a set of circumstances that would have alarmed the founders more than what's on that call, where you have a president using the full power of his office to try to effectively coerce a foreign leader that is completely dependent on our country for military, economic, diplomatic, and other support, to intervene in our election to help his campaign. It's hard to imagine a more corrupt course of conduct. So to my Republican colleagues that say, there's nothing to see here, or yeah, it's bad, but is it really something you'd remove from the president from office for? They're going to have to answer, if this conduct doesn't rise to the level of the concern the founders have, what conduct does? Now, we only know some of the facts at this point. The call record seems to be pretty indisputed. The suspension of military assistance is undisputed now. The sequestration of this call record and maybe others into a file in which they were never supposed to be placed, a file that is for classified information of the highest order, covert action, for example, those facts are not contested. But all the facts around that we still need to flesh out. What was the State Department's role? What was the Secretary's role? What was the role of the Attorney General? There's a great more that we need to know to understand the full depth of the president's misconduct. And maybe when that comes out, it will persuade some of those Republicans to recognize the gravity of the situation. But I think we have to be realistic here. There seems to be no floor below which this president can drop that some of the GOP members, and maybe even many of the GOP members, would not be willing to endorse, look away from, avoid comment on, let alone rise to condemn as incompatible with the duties of his office.
Make no mistake, in that telephone call, the president undermined our national security because of what he had done a few days earlier. So the president said, well, I didn't say that in the call. No, the sequencing of it. You have to look at the sequence. A few days before, the president withdrew that. Now, why? Why would that just come from the president? There was no, as far as we know, and we'll find out if there is, any National Security Council justification for the president withdrawing assistance that had been passed by the Congress of the United States in a bipartisan way. And then the president, just on his own, decided he was going to use it as leverage. So using that as leverage, we supported that military assistance in the interest of our national security, undermining our national security, undermining his oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution because he was overthrowing an act of Congress just on his own, undermining the integrity of our elections. And that's what means something to people in their lives. They have to know that their vote counts and that it will be counted as cast. And this President of the United States is stooping to a level that is beneath the dignity of the Constitution of the United States and our founders, since the chairman mentioned our founders. They put guardrails in the Constitution because they knew there might be someone who would overplay his or her power. They never thought that we would have a president who would kick those guardrails over and disregard the Constitution and say, Article 2 says that I can do whatever I feel like. So this is sad. We have to be prayerful. We have to be worthy of the Constitution as we go forward. We have to be fair to the president, and that's why this is an inquiry and not an outright impeachment. And we have to give the president his chance to exonerate himself, but he thinks what he did was perfect. So we have that situation. But I say to my colleagues, calmness, quiet, so that we can hear, what is being said in this regard. Again, when on that very day, September 17th, that was Constitution Day, a Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays ago from yesterday. That was when that explosion hit of what possibly happened in that phone conversation, which the president confirmed to me in our call. And that day was the day we observed the adoption of our Constitution, September 17th. On that day, way back when Benjamin Franklin left Independence Hall, people said to him, "What do we have, Dr. Franklin, a monarchy or a republic?" He said, "A republic, if we can keep it." It is our responsibility to keep that republic with the genius of a separation of powers, three co-equal branches of government, each a check and balance on the other. Separation of power, a republic, if we can keep it. That's our responsibility. That's the oath of office that we take, and that is what is one of the reasons why we just have to look at the facts and the Constitution. Any other objections people may have to the president have no place in this discussion in terms of, is he too cowardly to protect children from gun violence? Is he too cruel to protect dreamers? Is he too in denial to understand climate change? The list goes on. Save that for the election. This is about the facts relating to the Constitution, and that is how we will proceed with dignity, with respect, prayerfully, and again, worthy of the sacrifice of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform who fight for our freedom, and the aspirations of our children so they'll live under future presidents who will honor the Constitution of the United States. Thank you all very much.
Will the inquiry go?
Wow, well, at least we got something in there.
Congrats.
Same to you, Bill.